Hey everyone, Dr. Frunkey here with an awesome new knife consult for you on the Franck Souville Superbad. This is a knife that has captured my imagination for quite some time, and it was kind of totally out of the blue. I'll tell you a little story. I was at the Blade Show 2019 walking down the aisle where all the French knife makers were. There was Thierry Savidan, there was Philippe Georget, there was David Lespect, there was Tashi was over there. I was walking down and I saw this knife, or a knife very similar to this, and I noticed that it was made by a gentleman named Franck. My name is Frank, and so instantly I had a connection. He also had these on his table. This is his logo, which is a funky looking skull, and being that I work with skulls on a daily basis as a neurosurgeon, obviously I had an instant connection with him. He was a very humble maker, and with all these other popular French knife makers around him, his table was not getting as much attention as I was hoping, as I thought maybe it should, because on the table was sitting a series of this knife. Yes, you will notice I just opened that. This is a large slip joint folder that is a collaboration with Tashi. So this is called the Superbad. Franck makes a large size folding slip joint called the Bad Guy that has a more traditional drop point style blade, and he collaborated with Tashi to create the Superbad, which is a Tashi style blade design fit in with sort of the Franck style big slip joint, and it is the best of both of their design languages, and I'm really excited to have this. At the Blade Show 2019, I could not stop coming back to the table and playing with these knives. There was just something about the oversized, beefy feeling to them and the look of the knife that kept me coming back. Also, the handmade, high-quality nature of the knives were extremely appealing. Now, I'll also admit, this knife at the Blade Show was the only knife that drew blood on me. I'm not skilled, I at least was not skilled with slip joints opening and closing, and I managed to cut myself on one of them. And as many of you may be aware, the effect of a knife drawing blood is sort of like an intimate thing that develops between you and the knife, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Unfortunately, when I came back to his table to buy one of the knives on the last day, they had all just been snapped up by a knife dealer. And so I asked him if I could place an order with him because I recognized also that he does his own sole authorship Damascus. So I really wanted to get some of that. That has been a very true passion of mine lately. Perhaps you have seen the video on the Remy Lavial New Hardy, which also features some sole authorship Damascus. This is something that really, I think, separates the men from the boys in terms of knife making. When you can create your own beautiful Damascus steels and then forge it into a blade, that really sets somebody apart. So when I recognized that this was a Tashi collab with sole authorship potential from a very humble and very nice guy named Frank who likes skulls, obviously I'm going to be going for the knife. And so that's the story on it. I'm going to move this out of the way and we can go ahead and start getting into the details of this wicked Superbad right here. So I really love the name. It recalls like the movie Superbad, which is a hilarious thing. It also just makes it sound kind of like a jive thing, like it's super bad all the time. And, you know, I just like that name. For a while, I called it the Super Badass because it just looks really badass to me as well. Here you can see, we'll get some vital signs. You're looking at about 3.5 inches of blade length, about 8.25 inches of overall length for my French colleagues. That's going to be about 90 millimeters on the blade, 210 millimeters overall length. You're looking at about 115 millimeters on the handle, aka about 4.6, 4.7 inches on the handle with about 4.25 grip area. This is a bit of a bulky knife right here. This is really meant as a sort of a gentleman's sort of carry here, a 0.154 inches on the stock right there, and on the handle you're looking at 0.7 inches on this contoured handle. So it is a big, beefy knife. It's not necessarily intended for everybody's everyday carry. I really got this knife as sort of something that I've been calling the house knife. The knife that I have around the house that it's just a beautiful thing that I may not want to carry This is certainly fitting into that bill, and I could not be happier with it. Let me bring out another couple of knives for a size comparison. Here is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 and the Para 3. You'll notice I have the K390 models here from Bento Box Shop. This is bigger than either the Para 3 or the Para 2, so quite a large knife going on right there. I'll bring out another really big knife for a size comparison. This is the Spyderco Subvert, which is tremendously bigger. But as you can see, this is sort of on the larger side of what a normal 3.5-inch knife might be, and so you can get a sense of it there. Let me bring out the scale. You're going to know that this thing is made of a bunch of steel with these big steel bolsters, so it's going to be rather heavy, coming in at 7.8 ounces in this particular configuration. Now, Franck does work with various materials. He can do this in titanium. He can do this in a full sort of composite handle or wood handle, so it could be significantly lighter than my particular build, but it's not going to be the lightest knife that you have in your collection, no matter your config. So let's go ahead and break this knife down anatomically. I'm going to wipe this blade off from any fingerprints that I've put on it and show you this gorgeous blade of sole authorship Damascus. This is something that's very difficult to capture in photos or even briefly looking at the blade. This is a composite of 15 N20 and, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the other steel right now. O2. It's O2 and 15 N20. So both very good knife steels, nice and tough, easy to harden, and they provide a nice high contrast. Take a look at the other side of the blade. The thing that really captures my eye is the fact that there are so many layers. This is very much unlike some of the latest and common Damascus steels that we see out there, and even ones that I've had on my channel. Really, all I have right now to show you is like a Damacor. That's a relatively low layer material where you can see all of the individual layers. Here is the Miura, also in Damacor, where the Damascus cladding is relatively low layer. This is very high layer Damascus, and so you can actually feel and see the twists and the turns and the patterning and the way that this was done. And it just brings this knife completely to life. It's as if this pattern is actively swirling and moving in front of your eyes. Extremely high layer. The closer I get to it, maybe it'll go out of focus, but you can see the ripples of the layers. It almost looks dirty when you're looking at the blade from a distance, but when you get close and you can see the fine, fine, fine layers of the Damascus, it is breathtaking. There's the Tashi Barusha logo put in there. Gorgeous, gorgeous Damascus steel. Absolutely something different in my collection, and I can feel the passion and the pain almost of making this. It looks just like something that was just imbued with soul, and I don't know how to describe it, but this feels alive. And then he brings it to this gorgeous polish and he etches it, and look at the effect that it has. It's shiny, but it's matte, and it's so gorgeous. Now, not only to mention the steel is gorgeous, but look at the blade profile. This is a very Tashi-esque design with sort of the recurve, sort of almost tanto with the drop point and the swedge. It is a gorgeous, extremely usable blade shape. The recurve will really draw material into that cutting edge. It came extremely sharp. So Franck not only knows how to make a beautiful blade, but he certainly knows how to grind one. Look at how thin that comes down with that plunge grind. There's a nice sharpening choil. Comes very, very thin behind the edge. A full flat grind. Very, very thin behind the edge. Incredibly useful tool, as well as a beautiful thing. This one has a little bit of a fuller put on here in the traditional slip joint sense. It doesn't really do too much in terms of opening the knife. You really kind of grab it a little farther down, is a little bit easier to open it, but it does look very nice, and it keeps with the traditional feel of this slip joint style knife. Moving back to the pivot, this is obviously a slip joint, as I've mentioned a few times. It has a nice spring right here that you can see sort of actuates as you open the knife. You can see it sort of halfway open, and then it locks into place right there. Unlike many slip joints, this does not have a half stop. Frank explained to me at the show that the traditional French-style slip joint does not have a half stop or anything like that, but the pull is heavy enough and the closure force needed is heavy enough that it feels very safe and secure. It's not about to close on me in this way. I can't shake this in any way. It's a very tight action, so I really actually enjoy the walk and talk, I guess people call it. Without a half stop, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not as skilled with the lingo in the slip joint world, but I actually really enjoy the feeling that this knife has and what it forces me to do. This is something that's a little bit unique to this knife. Many of the fancy knives in my collection, I'll grab them and I'll want to play with them, but then, the damascus and things, you get your fingerprints on it and it doesn't look very nice and you want to wipe it off and all that stuff. This knife forces you to get your hands on it. Those knives, you kind of try to not touch anything. And it sort of takes away from the experience of a knife, which is supposed to be a tool in your hand that is an extension of yourself. This one forces you to manhandle the knife in order to open it and close it. You have to get a good grip on both sides of the knife, really handle the blade, put your fingers on it, and open and close the knife. And that really brings sort of intimacy with the knife that's a little bit different and hard to quantify, and I have really enjoyed it. It separates this from the flippers and the fast ball bearing knives that I've had for so long. And even though I am not really a slip joint guy traditionally, this one really has just captured my heart with its action and sort of masculine feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but I just enjoy that. The pivot itself is running on some type of washers on the inside right there. It is very smooth on the opening and closing, and I have no complaints about that. I love the way that it locks up here. Just a very, very clean looking mating right there. Beautifully done. You can see the dovetailing of the scales into the bolsters here. Speaking of the bolsters, this is a different pattern sole authorship Damascus right here. Also 15N2002 carbon Damascus, non-stainless Damascus, so I am having to care for this carefully. I just use EDCI and occasionally oil the blade. Super, super nice. This has just a standard little pivot thing right here, little pivot pin. It is a pinned pivot, so I'm not going to be able to adjust this in any way, but I shouldn't have to. What I do enjoy is the way that the Damascus sort of looks like it's radiating out from that little pin, and I really like that effect on both sides. He really did a great job of centering that pivot inside of the Damascus pattern so that it flowed very well. It looks great. And then these gorgeous ironwood scales. Absolutely the most beautiful ironwood I think I've ever seen on a knife. Really, really nicely flows with the rest of the knife. This thing just feels alive. When you put it in your hand and you feel the textures, it just feels like it's alive. The blade feels like it's liquid metal that's flowing. And this has a characteristic all to itself, and I could not be happier. Let's take a look here at the backspacer, the actual spring. This is not really a backspacer. This whole thing is a steel spring. If I wipe this off, you're going to see how gorgeously polished that is. You're going to see my stupid face reflected in there. Absolutely spectacular work. This knife is a big gentleman's slip joint. I don't know if I mentioned the frames are also titanium on this. This sort of takes the slip joint into the tactical world. I'm into the 3.5-inch flipping tacticals, and not so much into the small gentlemanly slip joints, but this is a nice combination of both worlds, and it adds to it the layer of sole authorship Damascus. What do I think of this knife? I think it's spectacular. I think that Frank is a super nice guy with an incredible talent. He makes very unique knives in the world of folding knives, and he does his own Damascus. This is something that really sets people apart in my mind when they're making knives, and he makes truly beautiful work. It's cool to see him collaborate with the French designer Tashi, and just to get this in hand. The ergonomics are incredible. It fills my hand so nicely. The thick contoured wood scales are lovely to hold. The ergos are great. The blade functions very well. This would be great in a standard finish as well for an actual EDC knife. You'll notice it does not have a clip. He did send it with a leather slip case. for carrying if you're into such things. This knife, however, like I mentioned, is going to be more of my in-the-house knife. And so it's for that function, it has been glorious, and I could not be happier. So go ahead and check out Franck Souville's work on Instagram. You can follow him at Souville, and then you can see him on Instagram, on Facebook as well. He has Franck Souville Knives. I'll try to leave links down below. If you're into his work, definitely give him a follow and ask him if you can get a custom build. This I asked for back around the time of Blade Show in June, and the knife was delivered back in September, and so very short turnaround on that. So very happy to get this knife. Thank you, Frank, for making the knife of my dreams right here, and thank you guys for watching. Go ahead and click like and subscribe down below. Leave some comments about what you think of the Superbad, and I'll see you on the next one. As always, this is Dr. Frunkey saying take care.